There was another question around LTV to CAC, but you've already answered that 3:1 is a good thumb rule to go, LTV to CAC ratio.
Mhm.
And
It really depends. Just expanding on that, right? It really depends on how much you have to invest in the relationship to get your money. Using SaaS as a easy way to explain this, like if you're selling to enterprise, it can take a very long time, which means that you're not only do you have a high CAC, it's also highly variable. Like someone could close at cost X, someone else could close at cost 10x, right? So then you need a higher ratio just to absorb that variability. You can't be
absolutely.
running like absolutely neck and neck at 3:1. You probably have to target a higher ratio so that you have the room for those guys who kind of cost you a little extra, right?
Maybe it's like on an average, it sort of turns out to be 3:1 is how maybe one could put
Right.
it.
It's a good exercise for any business to do to find out what works for them, right?
Right.
3:1 is a good starting point in the lack of any other data, but it's not something to kind of absolutely set in stone.
It's
It's
not
a good
sacrosanct, yeah.
Yes, and the kind of way to use it is also like, okay, if I've set a target of say 6:1, right, and then I realize that I'm achieving say 9:1, that means I'm making money at a more efficient rate than I targeted, which means I have a little more room to play in terms of growth, right? Whereas if I'm targeted 6:1 and I'm doing 4:1, I'm still okay. I'm still like not losing money compared, going by the 3:1 ratio. But I need to tighten my belt because I set a target of 6:1. I'm not making that. I need to get more efficient at how I, acquire and retain and make money out of
Hopefully
users.
that target also had a sort of a strong reason behind it and not just arbitrary, because sometimes you have these high targets, but then you don't have a strong thesis behind why
Yeah,
that number, right?
correct.
And so you tend to kind of punish yourself if you fall below that.
Yeah, that's what this kind of will go well beyond the scope of this. I can probably do like another 2 hour session on this, but this gets into, how much money is in the bank, what's your margin, what's the kind of burn rate, how much does it cost to get in a user? Like you have to factor in all this to say, like, I can basically the answer you're trying to say is I've acquired a user at cost X. I can afford to, let that cost sit on my books for a week, 2 weeks, 5 transactions, whatever,
Absolutely.
till it starts to pinch. And that's a very personal question to every business, right? Like what works for e-commerce X selling shoes is not going to work for e-commerce Y selling shoes.
Absolutely, yeah. Perfect. All right, Aditya, I think that brings us to the end of this session. We've just crossed the 1 hour timeline. Although I think the duration mentioned was 45 minutes.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but I think this was a really rich conversation, full of insights. I think you've shared really awesome stuff. So
Thanks.
thank you so
Happy
much
to.
thank you so much actually for agreeing to talk about this. And I'm sure we'll bring you back one of these days on another webinar on retention, because this is just the beginning of a series, right? We are going to have more episodes coming on this topic. It felt almost like a duty to do one on retention because of its outsized impact and its undersized attention.
Absolutely right. That's what I was just going to say. Like we talk a lot about tactics, moves, growth, acquisition, but yes, retention kind of takes a backseat, and it does come to bite us back when we don't look at it, and then acquisition cost is what then gets impacted when you come full circle.
Perfect, Aditya. Thank you so much, and I wish you a good evening